Here is the part nobody expects. Michael Jackson was terrified of horror movies. In 1999, during an MTV interview, he said that he was afraid to watch scary movies. And yet, the man who could not sit through a horror film spent 3 decades producing some of the most elaborate monster transformations, zombie choreography, and supernatural short films the music industry has ever seen. So what kept pulling him back to the monsters? December 11th, 1999. Michael Jackson sits across from Alex Coletti from MTV, the lights soft, his voice steady but hesitant. The question is simple. Does he like scary movies? Jackson laughs, then admits, I love movies, but I'm afraid to watch scary movies. They give me the creeps. The line lands quietly, but it opens a door. Here is a man who built his career on spectacle, who shaped pop culture with images of werewolves and the undead. Yet on record, he recoils from the very genre he helped redefine. There's a vulnerability in his confession, a glimpse of the boy from Gary, Indiana, who never quite shook the feeling of being haunted. The 1999 MTV special wasn't a tabloid ambush or a moment of self-parody. It was an artist, decades into global fame, admitting his limits in front of millions. The contradiction is hard to ignore. Michael Jackson, architect of the most famous monster dance in history, says he can't even sit through a horror film. The words are not a joke or a soundbite. They are a shield and a window. This on-air admission didn't just surprise fans, it set up a tension that would define his most ambitious works. Jackson's fear wasn't an obstacle, it was fuel. He didn't want to watch monsters, he wanted to become one. His public insecurity about horror became the engine for a career spent transforming fear into art, one supernatural metamorphosis at a time. Late in 1983, a phone rang in Los Angeles. On the other end was Michael Jackson, his voice urgent and almost breathless. He was calling John Landis, the director of An American Werewolf in London. The conversation did not start with pleasantries. Michael got straight to the point. "I want to turn into a monster. Can I do that?" Landis later recalled he had not seen many horror films. He was scared of that stuff. But the request was not about watching monsters on a screen. Michael wanted to become one. He wanted to step inside the nightmare, to take control of it, to own the fear that had always hovered at the edge of his imagination. The timing was electric. Thriller had just changed the shape of pop music, but Michael was restless. He was not satisfied with simply singing about the supernatural. He wanted to become the supernatural. The idea was not born in a studio meeting or a boardroom. It was born in that late-night call, a dare issued from one artist to another. "Can you make me something I am afraid to even look at?" Landis understood the challenge. He had seen what transformation could do on film. But Michael was not asking for makeup alone. He was asking for a new identity, a way to turn fear into spectacle. That call set everything in motion. The next morning, Landis began sketching ideas. Michael's fear became the blueprint for a new kind of pop storytelling, one where the monster was not just a threat, but a mirror. In that moment, horror stopped being something to run from and became something to become. Thriller did not begin as a safe bet. In 1983, spending $500,000 on a music video was almost unthinkable. The production ledger tells the story. $500,000 allocated for a 14-minute short film, with every dollar accounted for in prosthetics, set design, and hours of choreography. Michael Jackson wasn't just making a video. He was building a horror movie inside the pop world, and he wanted the best. Rick Baker, fresh off his Oscar win for An American Werewolf in London, was hired to engineer the transformation. Baker's team sculpted latex appliances that stretched over Michael's face, turning him into both werewolf and zombie. The process was slow and uncomfortable, but Michael insisted on authenticity. He studied the makeup sessions, fascinated by the way flesh and bone could be remade with glue and paint. The creative team did not stop at visual effects. Vincent Price, the legendary voice of Gothic cinema, was brought in to record the now iconic spoken word finale. The line, "Darkness falls across the land," became more than a lyric. It was a bridge between pop and horror, a signal that the borders between genres had collapsed. But not everyone was comfortable with the supernatural spectacle. Michael, a Jehovah's Witness at the time, requested a disclaimer. The video opened with a stark message that read, "Due to my strong personal convictions, I wish to stress that this film in no way endorses a belief in the occult." For millions of viewers, that black and white card was the first sign that Thriller was not just entertainment, but a negotiation with fear, faith, and identity. When Thriller premiered, it didn't just break records, it changed the rules. Critics called it a short film, not a promo. MTV played it on heavy rotation. For a generation, Thriller was a gateway drug to horror, making monsters safe, even glamorous. The zombie dance sequence became a ritual, repeated at weddings, parades, and playgrounds. Michael's fear of horror movies was real, but inside the makeup chair and on the dance floor, he found a way to own it. Thriller made horror a language anyone could learn, especially if they were too afraid to watch the movies. The ambition behind Captain EO dwarfed anything Michael Jackson had attempted before. In 1986, Disney poured as much as $23 million into a 17-minute three-dimensional film, enlisting Francis Ford Coppola to direct and George Lucas to produce. The result was not just a theme park attraction, but a studio-scale spectacle, a science fiction fantasy built for Tomorrowland, starring Jackson as a spacefaring hero facing a world ruled by darkness. Angelica Houston, cast as the Supreme Leader, embodied the monstrous other, a twisted metallic queen ruling over a planet drained of color and hope. Her presence was pure menace, all sharp angles and wires, until Captain EO arrived, not with weapons, but with music. The story's climax did not hinge on destruction or revenge. Instead, Jackson's character led a dance that transformed the Supreme Leader and her minions into beings of light. The monsters were not vanquished, they were redeemed. The threat melted away in a surge of choreography, color, and sound. The message was clear. Art could turn ugliness into beauty, fear into belonging. Captain EO's production budget rivaled that of a Hollywood feature. Disney Imagineers worked alongside Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic to create the film's groundbreaking effects. The finale's choreography, staged in full 3 dimensions, surrounded audiences with movement and transformation on every side. For 11 years, the show ran at Disney parks in California, Florida, Tokyo, and Paris. When Disney revived Captain EO in 2010, crowds lined up for another glimpse of Jackson's vision, one where monsters did not have to stay monsters forever. This was horror reimagined as hope. In Captain EO, Michael Jackson turned the spectacle of otherness into a celebration, using the language of monsters not to frighten, but to promise that even the strangest outcast could dance their way into the light. Ghost stands as Michael Jackson's most personal horror opera, a project he bankrolled with $15 million of his own money, assembling a dream team that included Stephen King, Mick Garris, and effects legend Stan Winston. The result is not just spectacle, but a 39-minute epic that set a Guinness World Record for the longest music video. At Cannes in 1997, Ghost screened out of competition, earning a place among legitimate cinematic works, not just pop curiosities. On screen, Jackson plays 5 roles, slipping between the misunderstood maestro and the hostile mayor, each layered in transformative makeup. The AV Club later called it a staggeringly blunt allegory for Jackson's own life, a tale of a so-called freak on trial before a torch-wielding crowd. Here, monsterhood becomes self-defense, not shame. The film's scale, its festival validation, and its technical ambition all point to a single obsession: turning the pain of being seen as monstrous into a performance that cannot be ignored. In 1984, a flash of pyrotechnics during a Pepsi commercial left Michael Jackson with second-degree burns on his scalp. The accident forced him into surgery and a cycle of wigs, hats, and camouflage. Soon after, his skin began to change as vitiligo set in, a diagnosis confirmed by his dermatologist and later acknowledged by Jackson himself. Each public appearance brought new scrutiny, with headlines dissecting every detail of his shifting features. But where others saw disfigurement or scandal, Michael found a language. The monsters he played on screen, werewolves, ghouls, and ghostly outcasts, were not just fantasy. They mirrored a life shaped by trauma, medical intervention, and a relentless spotlight. Transformation became a tool, a way to reclaim agency over a body in flux. Through prosthetics and makeup, he could control his own metamorphosis, turning pain and difference into spectacle. In his art, change was not a curse, but a form of power. Michael Jackson once said, "Believe it or not, I'm afraid to watch scary movies." Yet, in his hands, monsters became vehicles for transformation, not terror. Today, as pop culture still wrestles with otherness, his art reminds us, the true power lies not in being feared, but in redefining what frightens us.